Hi everyone. So here's video number two. Hope you liked my first video on measurement validity and reliability. This is also now at the request of one of your students to do a quick review of internal validity, and I'm going to throw external validity in there too because they're similar concepts, but internal validity has to do with the how much the research was the research done right. That's what's inside the experiment. And I like to think of external validity as how generalizable is your results and your study population to the larger target population you were trying to speak about in the experiment. Again, concepts of internal validity and external validity, as well as the concepts in my earlier video about measurement validity and reliability, really have to do with quantitative research. There are some researchers that don't even think that internal validity and external validity have anything to do with qualitative research. Some researchers will use it, some will not. But really, we're talking about in quantitative research. So let's do a quick little review of internal and external validity. I know the book did touch upon this, but I'm just going to review it right here. Okay. So again, I was talking about internal and external validity. This is a slide I like to show very often, talking about internal validity, if you can think about it, about what goes on inside the research design and the research experiment, the whole research, as opposed to what measurement validity was just talking about a way you would measure one part. That's just one part of the research. This is talking about the whole research. So internal validity of the whole research study is talking about, was the research done right? And then external validity exists somewhat outside the study. It's how much can I say about the results of the study? Does the same thing happen in other settings, in other labs, in other everyday settings? Okay, so let's see where I want to start here. Okay, so I put pictures of my dog here. Okay, so good research designs enables the investigator to control as much as possible for threats to internal and external validity. And threats to internal validity compromise our confidence in saying that a relationship actually exists, or what we appear to think exists between the independent and dependent variables. While threats to external validity compromise our confidence in stating whether the study's results are applicable to other groups. I like to think of that about, how generalizable is it to other groups, okay? So we spoke in the previous video about measurement validity, and we spoke very briefly, and you can read in the textbook about the different types of measurement validity. Okay, I want you to stop thinking of that right now, because that really has to do with, again, a way you would measure a certain concept. There's my husband yelling for the dog. Internal validity depends on the extent to which the criteria for causality are met and refers to whether or not causal inferences can be drawn from these results. Okay, so why is internal validity so important? Why do I put pictures of my dog? Because it is somewhat of a boring concept. I think it's interesting, but not everybody does. So I often put pictures of my dogs here. My dog Lulu here. So what is so important about internal validity? So based on the study design, how confident are we that the outcomes we see following the intervention are a result of that intervention and not something else? Okay, again, the approximate validity with which we infer that a relationship between those variables is possibly causal. Okay, so different threats to internal validity. Okay, so when you're looking at a whole research design, when you evaluate research articles, think about, did something going on that maybe threatened the validity of the whole experiment? Was there perhaps maybe a selection bias when a comparison group and an experimental group are different in the related methods used to assign those subjects to the groups? Would you be measuring children in two different classrooms or in two different school districts, one being of a lower socioeconomic status and one being of a higher socioeconomic status? So if you took those two, let's say fourth grade classrooms or something like that, and you gave an intervention to one and not to the other, when you compare those groups, are those groups inherently different? Or are there characteristics within that group that might make them different? And that might be selection bias right there. Or it could be, I'm going to give a self-esteem workshop to the first 10 people that volunteer to be in it. And then I'll also give a control group of, I'll do a comparison group, of 10 people who didn't, sign up right away. So those first 10 people are going to be really motivated. compared to those other 10 people that signed up later. So there might be an inherent difference in that those selected to be in the intervention. Okay. Other ones include mortality or attrition. Basically, is the sample you started with not the sample that you end up with? Was there a dropout? Okay. Other threats to internal validity, a big one that you seem to see. These are grouped together. These are natural developments of the subject that you'll often see. So testing. So if you take a pre-test and you take a post-test, you're going to remember your pre-test, okay, if it's too close together. Okay, and if it's a pre-test that's like an intelligence scale or something like that, and you ask questions that measure logical reasoning, if you give that test again, the person's going to remember the questions from the first time. Okay, and that may influence the way that they answer the questions on the second time. Okay, so that might be a test-retest threat to internal validity. If you give a measure for depression, you're going to remember the way you answered the questions the first time. It's just it becomes a threat when that interferes with the research situation. So that's a threat to internal validity called the testing effect or test-retest threat. Okay, maturation is that the respondents change as a result of natural passing of time. Sometimes when people listen to long, lengthy research videos, they get tired. So maybe you're not answering the questions with the same level of concentration in the beginning as you do towards the end. Okay, that's a natural effect, and that may influence the answers. Also, can be if it's a longitudinal study, and like let's say it's on children. Children get older, and their critical thinking skills do develop at certain milestone ages. So a kid at 5 years old and a kid at 7 years old, they're going to have different abilities to answer questions. So that could also be a threat to internal validity. And then statistical regression is that if you have a big enough sample, eventually your scores are going to start regressing to the mean, okay? So other threats to internal validity could be that something happened outside the research experiment that threatened the results, and that the results you see are really due to that event that happened outside of the research experiment rather than something that went on in the research. So the example I always use for the history effect, that one right here, okay, is so I always say to people, okay, so I work in New York City and I do a stress management workshop, and I do it on September 1st, 2001. And I give a stress management workshop, and I want to see if there's lasting effects. So I go back a month later, and I give another measure of stress, okay? And I see that instead of stress going down after my stress management workshop, stress actually went up. So on September 1st, 2001, and on September 30th, 2001, I see that the stress levels actually went up. And if I was living under a rock and I didn't know what happened, I might say that, oh, my intervention didn't work, okay? But no, there was something that happened in New York City outside of the research situation at that point, and that would be September 11th, where the anxiety of the entire country, and specifically New Yorkers, did get very high, and that might be the cause of the stress. So that's the history effect threat to internal validity. Okay, that can be an event, okay, or it can be just a secular drift, which is broader or social or economic trends that impact the findings of the study. I bet if we did studies now as opposed to 5 years from now, the political discourse would be a trend that we would see a lot of difference with right now in the current political climate. Instrumentation if I use a measure that would be a threat to internal validity, that would lack reliability and validity, that would threaten the whole experiment. Okay, and other things can be when the comparison group is some way affected or affects the treatment group. Sometimes in a research experiment, the treatment group or the non-treatment group finds out that they're the treatment group or the non-treatment group, and sometimes they get a little angry about that, and maybe that affects the research situation. Okay, that might be resentful demoralization. Some kind that can be diffusion, that they start knowing these things, that they are in the treatment group, and maybe that impacts the way that they answer the questions, okay? So those are also threats to internal validity, okay? So to move on to external validity has more to do, and I use this in the ability, and I always do this, of my research sample to generalize to the larger target population. So if I have a population of 10 social workers from Connecticut, and I do a survey with them, is that a good representation of all the social workers in the United States? Is my external validity in this study a good measure to what I think all social workers? Okay, there might be some problems with that. So that actually might have low external validity due to sample size. Maybe I didn't sample well. Maybe I didn't use a random sample. Specifically, that size is not very good. And also, maybe I didn't use random sampling and I just used the first 10 people. And that's not going to be representative of every social worker. Okay, so external validity refers to the degree to which the results of that investigation can be generalized and across individual settings and times. And external validity can be divided into population validity and ecological validity. Okay, and population is basically what I was talking about. How representative is the sample of the population, and how widely do those findings apply? Ecological validity is just a little bit, it's present to the degree that a results generalize across settings, and that basically includes the interaction effect of testing. That normal people, when they are evaluated, do not walk around in a research experiment. So when you are involved as a participant in a research experiment, as you all remember from your ethics part that you studied here, you have to know that you're in a research situation. Okay, and being in a research situation is going to affect the way that you answer questions or the way that things are measured. Okay, that doesn't, we have to do that because you can't not inform someone that they are in a research study, but that is something that is a threat to external validity. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. If it's more confusing, don't watch it. I'm just trying to help out you guys. If for any reason over the next few days you come up with more concepts that are confusing to you, if you're like, okay, listen, I don't understand sampling too well, let me know. I can make these videos and post them up here, or we can do WebEx, or we can do phone. I am going to be traveling this weekend to my son's baseball tournament, so I will be on email, and I could probably arrange a phone call if you needed that, or just let me know what you're confused about. I can always, run in the corner and do one of these videos, okay? Take care. Have a great night or day or whenever you're watching this. Okay. Oh, wait, let's see the dog. Lulu, come here. Come here. She's so cute, isn't she? I love her. Okay, bye.